The moment I stepped into the courtroom, my mom laughed quietly, and my dad just shook his head. It felt like I was the joke, like the people who were supposed to love me most were mocking me. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was breaking inside. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Arden. I'm 27 years old, and from a small town in Oregon. Not long ago, I thought I had everything I ever wanted: a loving family, a man who adored me, and a future that seemed bright. My parents, Carla and Mark, were strict but caring. We had our differences, but I always believed we stood by each other. My mom used to call me her sunshine, and my dad never missed a chance to tell people how proud he was of me. Then came Liam. He was charming, funny, and made me feel safe. We met at a friend's barbecue, and from the start, I thought he was different. He listened when I spoke, remembered the little things, and treated me like I mattered. Within a year, he proposed. My parents seemed thrilled, or at least that's what I thought. We started planning our wedding, and for a while, life felt perfect. But then small things began to change. My mom became distant, almost cold. My dad stopped picking up my calls as often. I told myself they were just busy or stressed, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Liam, too, started acting strange. He would step outside to take calls and come home later than usual. When I asked, he'd smile and say, "Work stuff, nothing to worry about." Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. One night, I woke up and saw Liam texting someone in the dark. When I asked who it was, he said it was a friend from work and quickly put his phone away. I wanted to believe him, but a quiet fear started growing inside me. Looking back, I realized the signs were always there. The whispers, the secret looks, the way they all avoided my eyes. I just didn't want to believe that the people I loved most could ever hurt me. But that day in the courtroom proved everything I had ignored. And it was only the beginning of the truth that would change my life forever. The weeks leading up to the wedding were supposed to be full of joy, but something didn't feel right. Arden tried to stay excited, focusing on dresses, flowers, and plans, yet a quiet worry sat heavy in her chest. Her mom, Carla, who once helped her with every little detail, now seemed distant. When Arden showed her ideas or asked for advice, Carla only gave short answers, her smile tight and forced. Her dad, Mark, started ignoring her calls, claiming he was busy with work. Arden told herself it was just stress, but deep down she knew something had changed. Liam, on the other hand, seemed more connected to her family than ever, sometimes too much. He'd stop by her parents' house even when she wasn't around, saying he wanted to get to know them better. At first, Arden thought it was sweet, but soon it started to feel strange. He'd mention small details about her parents' opinions or plans that she hadn't even heard about. When she asked how he knew, he would just smile and say, "Your mom told me." It left her uneasy. The closer the wedding came, the more Arden felt like she was being left out of her own life. Her family talked in hushed tones when she entered the room. Her calls sometimes went unanswered for days. Even Liam started acting distant, often stepping outside to take calls and returning with vague excuses. Arden tried to talk to him, but every time, he brushed her off with a quick kiss and a promise that everything was fine. One night, she came home late from a dress fitting and heard her mom's voice through the slightly open kitchen window. Carla was on the phone, her voice low and tense. "She doesn't have to know yet," she whispered. The words hit Arden like a slap. She froze, listening for more, but the line went quiet. Her mom hung up quickly when she noticed Arden at the door, pretending nothing had happened. That night, Arden couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Who was her mom talking to? What didn't she need to know? The thought of her parents keeping secrets made her stomach twist. The home that once felt warm and safe now felt heavy with silence. For the first time, Arden felt truly alone, standing in the middle of her perfect life, watching it quietly fall apart. One cold evening, Arden was folding laundry when she noticed Liam's jacket hanging on the back of the chair. Something inside the pocket made a faint crinkling sound. Without thinking much, she reached in and pulled out a thick envelope. Her name was written across it in neat handwriting, but she didn't recognize it. Curiosity turned to dread as she tore it open. Inside were legal documents, her name printed clearly at the top. She skimmed through them, her breath catching as the words began to make sense. Property transfer, authorization, signature, her own name, written in her handwriting, but she had never signed these papers. Her hands started to shake. She compared the signature over and over, whispering to herself that it had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. Someone had forged her name. Her heart pounded as she looked closer. The papers listed both Liam and Carla as parties involved. For a moment, her mind refused to believe it. Her fiancé and her mother, together, handling property that belonged to her. Her throat tightened as a sick realization crept in. The meetings, the whispers, the way her mother had suddenly grown cold. It all connected. She sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, her mind spinning. Tears blurred the words, but the truth was sharp enough to cut through anything. The two people she trusted most had been working behind her back. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was planned. When Liam came home later that night, she held the documents out to him with trembling hand. "What is this?" she asked. He looked at the papers, then at her, and for the first time, there was no warmth in his eyes. His voice was flat. "You weren't supposed to find those yet," he said. She waited for an explanation, but he only sighed. "Your parents never really liked you, Art. They said you were too emotional, too easy to control. They just wanted what was left from your inheritance. And honestly, so did I." Her chest felt hollow. The man she had planned to marry spoke to her like she was a stranger. The final piece of her world fell apart in that moment. Liam walked away without a trace of guilt, leaving her standing in the middle of the room, clutching papers that proved her life had been built on lies. Everything she loved had turned against her, and all she could do was stare at the proof in her hand. Arden drove straight to her parents' house, clutching the papers like they were burning her hand. When her mother opened the door, she didn't even look surprised. Arden's voice shook as she held up the documents and asked for the truth. Carla crossed her arms, her face calm, almost bored. "You're overreacting," she said flatly. "You always do this." Arden stared at her, stunned. Her father walked in, adjusting his glasses, and asked what was going on. When she showed him the forged signature, he didn't even look at the pages. "You've always had a wild imagination," he said, his tone sharp. "You're making things up to cause drama." Each word hit her harder than the last. They didn't even try to deny it. They just made her feel like she was losing her mind. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She turned to leave, but her mother's voice followed her. "You need to stop embarrassing yourself." Liam was right. You can't handle real life. Her heart cracked at the mention of his name. She rushed home, but when she opened the door, Liam's things were gone. His clothes, his laptop, even the framed photos, all missing. She ran to her drawer where she kept her savings, but the envelope was empty. Her bank app confirmed what she feared. Most of her money had been withdrawn. He had taken everything. The next few days blurred together. She could barely eat or sleep. Her boss called twice, asking why she hadn't shown up for work. Eventually, she stopped answering. Rent piled up, and soon she lost her apartment too. Each morning she woke up feeling smaller, weaker, like she was disappearing piece by piece. One night, unable to face another friend's question or her parents' silence, she sat alone in her car parked near a quiet overlook. The rain tapped softly against the windshield as she stared at the empty road ahead. The city lights blurred through her tears. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone she didn't recognize. Tired eyes, trembling lips, no trace of the girl she used to be. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a voice barely louder than the rain, she whispered, "They'll regret this." The words felt strange at first, but they gave her something she hadn't felt in weeks: control. In that dark, quiet moment, she promised herself she wouldn't stay broken forever. Days turned into weeks before Arden found the strength to reach out for help. One afternoon, she sat in her car outside a cafe, scrolling through her contacts, unsure who to trust. Then she saw a familiar name, Nate. He'd been her friend in college, the kind of person who always believed in fairness. Last she'd heard, he worked at a law firm. With shaking hands, she sent a message. When he agreed to meet, she almost didn't go. But the moment she saw him, something inside her softened. He didn't ask too many questions, he just listened. After hearing everything, his calm voice carried a quiet determination. "We'll find out what they did," he said. Those words gave her a tiny spark of hope. They started meeting in small coffee shops and quiet libraries, surrounded by stacks of papers and a laptop that rarely closed. Nate knew how to access public records, bank filings, and old legal documents. Bit by bit, a pattern began to appear: transactions, signatures, and hidden transfers. One night, Nate leaned closer to the screen, frowning. "Look at this," he said. Her parents had moved her trust fund into another account months ago, the same one connected to Liam's name. Arden stared at the numbers, her stomach twisting. Everything she'd worked for, everything her grandparents left her, was gone long before she even knew what was happening. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was written in black and white. But instead of breaking her, the truth began to clear her mind. Nate helped her organize every piece of evidence. He taught her how to save recordings, trace messages, and backup files. They stayed up late comparing documents, highlighting details that might prove what had been done. Each new discovery made her heartbeat steadier, her mind sharper. Arden no longer cried when she thought about Liam or her parents. The pain was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't wild or crushing anymore. It was focused. She could almost see the path ahead. For the first time in months, she slept through the night, her phone beside her, filled with proof. She didn't want revenge and anger. She wanted justice. As she closed her laptop one evening, her reflection caught her eye. There was something new in her expression, calm, certain, and unafraid. The spark inside her had returned, and this time, it was not going out. Arden knew she couldn't show strength yet. If she wanted them to reveal the truth, she had to make them believe she was still the same broken girl they left behind. One evening, she sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone before typing a message to her mother. Her fingers trembled as she wrote, "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I need help." It took minutes before she hit send. The reply came quickly. Carla's tone through the text felt almost smug. She agreed to meet the next afternoon at a quiet cafe outside town. Arden forced herself to sound fragile, thanking her and pretending to be lost. She didn't sleep that night, going over the plan she and Nate had built. Her phone was set to record automatically. All she had to do was stay calm and wait for Carla to talk. When her mother arrived, she looked confident, almost pleased. She reached across the table, giving a practiced smile. "I'm glad you're finally being reasonable," she said softly. Arden nodded, keeping her voice low. "I just want to understand what happened," she whispered. Carla sighed dramatically, stirring her coffee. "You were never good with responsibility. Someone had to handle things for you." Arden stayed quiet, her heart pounding. She asked about the papers, pretending confusion. Carla leaned back, lowering her voice. "You signed them, remember? Maybe you forgot." When Arden shook her head, Carla smirked. "Well, it doesn't matter now. Everything's already in motion." Then, as if to prove her cleverness, she added, "I had to take care of it myself. You'd never have agreed to sign anyway." The words slipped out casually, but they were exactly what Arden needed, an admission. She ended the meeting early, pretending to be too upset to stay. Once she was in her car, she exhaled for the first time in hours. The recording had worked. Her mother's voice was clear, the confession undeniable. She sent a copy to Nate, who called within minutes. "This is it," he said. "You've got her." The next day, Arden met with a lawyer Nate recommended. Together, they reviewed everything, the forged signature, the bank records, and now the recording. The lawyer listened carefully, then nodded. "We'll file a civil case. It's strong." For the first time, Arden didn't feel powerless. She felt steady. Her plan was no longer just an idea. It was real. They had taken everything from her once, but now she had the truth, and she was ready to use it. The summons went out early on a Monday morning. By noon, Liam's messages began to pour in short, frantic bursts of words. "We need to talk. You don't understand. Please, let me explain." Arden read them in silence, her phone screen glowing in the dim light of her apartment. She didn't reply. For once, the quiet felt powerful. Within days, the news spread through their small town. People who once praised her parents now looked at them with suspicion. Carla's friends stopped returning her calls. Whispers followed her wherever she went. At the local grocery store, someone murmured her name under their breath, shaking their head. Mark, once respected at his office, came home early more often, avoiding stares and questions he couldn't answer. Liam, meanwhile, started showing up in places he knew Arden might go. He left notes on her car windshield, each one more desperate than, "We can fix this," one read. Another simply said, "I made a mistake." But Arden didn't crumble this time. She watched from a distance as his calm exterior fell apart. Mutual friends told her he'd been calling everyone he knew, trying to find out how much she had on him. She let him wonder. Every reaction, every attempt to control the story, was more proof of guilt. Arden documented it all, adding messages and screenshots to her growing folder of evidence. She didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't explain. The silence that once came from pain was now her shield. Her parents didn't call her directly, but word reached her that they were furious, blaming each other for what had happened. The image they'd spent years building was cracking. Invitations to dinners stopped. People who once admired them now avoided their names in conversation. Carla tried to act unaffected, but Arden saw through the facade when she passed her mother at the courthouse. The confidence was gone. Arden no longer felt the weight of their judgment. The fear that used to make her question herself had faded. She went through each day with a quiet steadiness, handling her work, attending meetings with her lawyer, keeping her focus sharp. One night, as she looked out at the city lights, she realized she didn't care if they ever apologized. Their approval, the thing she once craved, no longer mattered. What mattered was truth, and the knowledge that she was finally standing on her own, stronger than they ever expected her to be. The morning of the hearing was quiet, almost too calm. Arden stood outside the courthouse steps, breathing in the cold air. This was the moment everything had led to. She straightened her jacket, held her head high, and walked through the doors. As soon as she entered, she saw them, her parents sitting beside Liam. Carla let out a faint laugh, the same cruel sound that had haunted her for months, and Mark slowly shook his head, eyes full of disappointment, as if she were the one who had done wrong. Arden didn't flinch. She took her seat beside her lawyer, her hands steady on the table. The clerk called the case, and the room settled into silence. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim. She was there for truth, not revenge. Her lawyer began calmly, introducing evidence piece by piece. The forged signatures came first, copies of the documents Liam had hidden. Each page was displayed for the court to see. Carla's confident expression began to crack. Next came the audio recording. The sound of her mother's voice filled the room, clear and undeniable. I had to take care of it myself. She'd never have agreed to sign anyway. Carla's hand twitched, her eyes darting to Liam, who stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Mark shifted in his seat, avoiding everyone's gaze. The people in the courtroom whispered softly, the weight of truth spreading like a current. Then the bank transfers appeared on the screen, every transaction traced back to the same account under Liam's name. The numbers told a story no one could deny. The lawyer explained how the trust fund had been moved, how every step was intentional, how Arden's name had been used without her knowledge. Arden watched quietly, feeling no triumph, only a deep, calm certainty. Liam tried to interrupt, muttering excuses, but the judge's voice cut through. You'll have your turn. When he finally spoke, his words stumbled, shallow and rehearsed. Carla stayed silent now, her earlier laughter gone, her face pale and still. Mark looked smaller somehow, his head bowed. Arden kept her eyes forward, her heart steady. Every truth she had gathered, every night she had spent doubting herself, was now laid bare in front of them. The betrayal had come full circle, but she no longer carried its weight. When the judge called a recess, she stood, meeting her mother's eyes for just a second. There was no anger left, only the quiet power of someone who had survived. The courtroom was silent when the judge returned to deliver the verdict. Arden sat perfectly still, hands clasped in her lap, her lawyer calm beside her. The sound of papers shuffling echoed in the room. Then the words came, clear, firm, and final. The court ruled in her favor. Her trust fund and all related assets were to be restored immediately. For a heartbeat, everything around her went quiet. Across the room, Liam's face drained of color. The judge continued, listing the charges against him: fraud, forgery, and unlawful use of personal documents. He tried to speak, but his lawyer pulled at his sleeve, whispering for him to stop. Carla's hand gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Mark sat frozen, staring at the floor, saying nothing. Years of their pride and control crumbled in a single afternoon. Whispers filled the gallery as the details sank in. Reporters and curious onlookers began scribbling notes. The family name that once carried weight now hung heavy with shame. Arden didn't turn to look at them. She didn't need to. She had spent enough time searching for acknowledgement from people who had never truly seen her. Now, she had no reason left to seek their eyes. When the hearing ended, she gathered her things slowly. Outside the courthouse doors, the air felt lighter than she remembered. Cameras flashed, but she didn't stop for questions. Her lawyer congratulated her quietly before leaving, giving her a reassuring nod. She stood there alone for a long moment, letting the cool wind brush against her face. Freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. There was no celebration, no burst of joy. Just calm. For the first time in months, her chest didn't ache. She walked to her car, opened the door, and sat there in silence. The weight that had followed her everywhere seemed to melt away. Tears came, slow and steady, but they weren't from grief. They carried something softer, peace. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. Every loss, every cruel word, every sleepless night had led to this quiet moment. She wasn't broken anymore. The lies were gone, the truth had spoken, and she had survived it all. When she finally wiped her face, she smiled faintly. For the first time, the world felt still, and hers again. Months passed, and the storm around Arden's name finally faded. She left the city behind and drove north until the familiar places no longer hurt to remember. Montana's open skies and quiet roads felt like a new beginning. In a small town surrounded by hills and tall trees, she found a place that felt untouched by her past. The rent was cheap, the people polite but not curious, and that was exactly what she needed. She used the savings she still had to rent a small shop on Main Street. It had big windows that filled with morning light and enough space for her art supplies. She called it New Ground Studio. The first weeks were slow, but she didn't mind. She painted, designed prints, and built something that belonged only to her. Each day she opened the door and turned the sign to open. She felt a quiet pride. No one was there to take it away this time. Sometimes, when the shop was empty, she'd sit near the window and think about everything that had happened. The betrayal still hurt when she let herself remember, but the pain no longer owned her. It had shaped her, taught her how strong she could be when there was nothing left to hold on to. She realized that trust can break, love can fade, and family can turn cruel. But even then, life keeps moving forward. She had learned that the deepest wounds don't always bleed. Some just stay silent until you learn to live beside them. What once felt like an ending had become her start. When people asked where she came from, she smiled and said, Oregon, but never explained more. The past didn't need to be retold to define her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she recorded a short message for the people who had followed her story online. Her voice was calm, steady. Sometimes the ones meant to protect you are the ones who break you. But that doesn't have to be the end. You can rebuild, even from nothing. She paused, her reflection soft in the camera light. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, remember, you can rise again. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story. It matters more than you think. She ended the recording with a faint smile, turned off the lights, and locked the door. Outside, the air was cool and still. For the first time in a long time, Arden didn't look back. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me till the end of this wild story. Imagine walking into court and seeing your own parents side with the man who betrayed you. Painful, right? But sometimes losing everything helps you find your real strength. If this story hit you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one. Bye.